But before we go to the topic, you'll have to educate me on the topic also. But first thing, please, you have to tell us about yourself. So Tabitha, please.
Hi, Vikram. Thank you for giving us the stage. We're very excited, I think, both of us, to discuss neurodiversity, particularly autism, and the impact it has on conflicts and conflict resolution. I'm a mediator. I mainly mediate in disputes around the workplace, as well as commercial conflicts. And I've become aware of neurodiversity as a topic in conflict, partially because some of my family members and also some of my friends later on are diagnosed with something on the neurodiversity spectrum. I'm what they consider a neurotypical, so I don't have any diagnosis as of yet.
So maybe they're getting the diagnosis wrong. Or maybe they
haven't. They might be, yeah.
Because maybe aren't we all? So
that's a good thing, because I do think neurodiversity is not just about the people with diagnosis. It's about embracing the fact that everyone's wired differently and may respond to stress, to information, to learning in a different manner. Everyone has their own preferences and their own weaknesses, perhaps, on that scale of adapting to information. So that's and processing.
Why you'll take us to the topic, but getting the pronunciation, Myrthe.
Yeah,
Myrthe, please, you have to tell us about yourself, and then we'll move to the topic.
Yes, so I'm Myrthe. As you know, probably from the announcement, I am actually autistic. I'm in my late 40s now. Or mid 40s. I was diagnosed about 10 years ago, so I only found out I'm autistic when I was 37. I live in the Netherlands. I currently work part-time as an assistant archivist at a small private archive in The Hague, where I live, but I also work as an autism consultant, advisor, trainer, informing people about autism and what it is to live as someone with autism. I have a very different background, educational background, actually, than autism related or archiving related. Once upon a time, I studied Dutch law, bachelor's in Dutch law and a master's in public international law, and I studied Eastern European studies, Russian studies. I spent a lot of time, maybe a decade altogether, living abroad, but I moved back to my home country 10 years ago. And now I do different things, and that's what I like, what I've always liked.
So that's my view. I mean, maybe you can start it off. One, of course, you can tell us about autism, and then the larger neurodiversity, that part of it, please.
Tabitha, you want to?
I thought maybe we would start with you only.
With me? Yeah. Okay.
I would start with you only because, look, you are, I mean,
yes,
of course, not unlike us, you've been diagnosed. That's the thing. So maybe you can just tell us about it as much as you want to. I mean, the thing is that, look, the idea is to educate as much as getting into the actual connection with mediation.
With mediation, yes.
So first, the education on.
Okay, so there is, how to say it, there is a lot that is not known about autism. They're currently doing a lot of research about what causes autism, or what, so there's part of it is genetic. They're doing research on the genes, the chromosomes that have do not so much cause autism, but are relevant to it. There may also be there's also more and more recent research that shows that stress factors may have an impact already. For example, when a woman's pregnant, stress factors may influence whether her baby is born autistic or not. So I don't really want to go into what causes autism. Also, I'm not sure, for me personally, that is not, and for many actually autistic people, that is not the most relevant thing. I would say a lot more relevant to us is how to make our lives, how to be able to live our lives, our best lives possible, in the sense that how, because there's a lot of stigma around autism. People with autism are often discriminated against in the workforce, rejected for jobs that they are perfectly qualified for because they are autistic, and an employer may think that's too complicated, that requires too much guidance. People have a lot of stereotypical ideas about, or many people, I should say, still have a lot of stereotypical ideas about autism. People with autism are all IT nerds, like not capable of empathy, not capable of social interaction. Those things are really not true. People with autism do feel empathy, and they do feel for others. Only very often they do not know how to express it, or it overwhelms them. The feelings what they feel inside, the emotions, it overwhelms them. They don't know how to express it, how to show it, or how to show that they care. So if they do, it may not be the way you expect. For example, small example, I can give you a small example. When something sad is happening, I will not be the one to comfort you. That's awkward for me. Like I will not be the one to put an arm around you, but I will be the one who makes the coffee, the tea, who makes sure that the dishes are done, who gets you shopping. I will help in practical ways. That's my way of showing that I care. So same with not wanting, or there's another stereotype that says that people with autism cannot have friendships or relationships.
We've been friends for 20 years, so that's
yes, that's yes. So exactly. So there we go. But again, it's not necessarily true. A lot of people want contact, human contact, want contact with other people, whether as friends or as partners. I actually do know a lot of fellow autistic people who have partners, have children, very happy with their families. But again, it doesn't, people with autism, we don't always know how to express that. And when what we express is not like what people expect from us, like what's socially acceptable, then you have a bit of a problem. Another thing that I'm very interested in personally is how things like how a concept that like autism is maybe to what extent it's cultural. I give you another example, especially in because the current idea of autism, or the current diagnosis that's very often used, is very, I would say, Western oriented, and it's also very behavior centered. It requires different behavior from in order to get a diagnosis. That your behavior is looked at. For example, problems with social interaction. In our Western cultures, very often the example of making eye contact is given. Like people with autism are said to not make eye contact. I can tell you, I do not like making eye contact because it's physically uncomfortable for me. Looking into someone's eyes, it's like really, it physically hurts me. It's like a knife cutting through my brain or something like that. So yes, I prefer not to make eye contact because it's distracting. But there are cultures on this earth and societies where making eye contact is not expected of you. For example, it's very impolite as a younger person to make eye contact with an older person. So where do you go with your autism, like your social awkwardness or your lack of social interaction, when yeah. So that's not, but that's a whole different story. That is one of my personal interests that's grown out of my living abroad for such a long time, and for my living in different cultures. So yeah, there's a lot of stigma, stereotypes that don't always. Yeah.
No, I think that, because I tell you why the larger discussion on first, of course, we only picked up autism, and of course you're going to tell us the larger, the Tabitha will tell us about neurodiversity in general also. But why we have to have this discussion is because if you have to look at any aspect, so we are of course focusing on mediation, the understanding of what goes behind it, because when you said autism, of course, autism will be at different levels. It'll be it's a spectrum, so it'll be at different levels of the spectrum, and we generalize. It's like calling someone an Indian. How do you say that? I mean, look, we come from various parts. We have a different, totally. I mean, look at the country. 1.3 billion people. Are all of us going to be the same? So same thing.
Exactly.
So each aspect of it needs to be understood. And then the stereotypes, why I'm giving you the linkage with, say, Indians, is because there are stereotypes of Indians which are carried around.
Of course, yes.
And then the cultural aspect of everyone should fit into this box. And you very clearly, right, nicely said about the eye contact. In India also, they say, I mean, of course, things have changed, but the aspect of a more rural population here would still follow it, that you don't look an elder in the eye when you're talking to them. Keep your eyes down, kind of thing. So these are things that it is something which affects a lot of the aspects. So I think we need to, as a society in general, become more sensitive to a lot of aspects of cultural differences, maybe neurodiverse differences. I think so. I think we have to have a much larger discussion on that. It's important. I think it's very important, and that's why I'm saying we can. Yeah,
I very much agree with you, and I think it's very important to question what is normal.
Exactly.
In all kinds of aspects of our life, from neurodiversity, sexual orientation, religion, society, behavior. What is normal? Who is normal?
Exactly. And who decides who's normal? That's
the most important thing. And what is the cost of not fitting into that normal?
Exactly.
So,
and I think I'll tell you why also another focus that we have to do is everyone talks about problems and it's so problem about people. What about the good aspects? An autistic person has very good aspects they bring in. Like, I don't know, of course you would have seen what Temple Grandin, that her videos, and how she uses it to her benefit.
Exactly.
So we have to focus on those things. Same thing. Look, I'll go back to again the Indians. When you talk about Indians and they say you're good at software development, or you're good in, say, you go to the US and you find out you have a large population of doctors who are Indians. So focus on the good aspects, bring that good aspect out of people.
Exactly.
Why should you even say that, okay, this is a problem? No, this is a damn good thing. This aspect of what this person brings in is a very important aspect of life. Please understand and accept and appreciate, and then take it forward. So those are discussions we need to have.
Exactly. No, I very much agree with you. As for example, returning back to autism, yes, many autistic people will have some sort to social difficulties to a certain degree, some more than others. Some are very good at masking, pretending that they're fit in or have learned life skills. Yes, that they fit in. Exactly. They have learned skills to hide the way they're different. But you can also think lots of autistic people, what they bring, for example, to the workforce is eye for detail. They work very precise. They see patterns and they see what's different. They see when a pattern is broken. So you can say, when you can look at those qualities and say a person with autism, I know of examples where someone delivered excellent quality work. Their work was very well, but because they didn't fit in the social group, they were let go because you're not a good team player or something like that. I'm like, what does that matter for their work? So yes, and when you're an employer who employs autistic people and you give them the space and the opportunity to be themselves, and with their qualities and their vulnerabilities, and you give them place to grow and to develop, and you give them work that fits their talents, tasks that fits their talents and their strengths. You have very often a very loyal employee, which is another thing to consider. I think research has been done that people with autism who have a good work fit, they stay in their jobs much longer than they stay with their employer much longer than non-autistic people. So there's that as well.
So Tabitha, I'm getting a little later only because we need to discuss this aspect to take it forward on the mediation. So I'm just going back to what you were saying is that fitting a round peg in a square hole. I mean, why would you want to do that? The round peg has its own ways of going about things. It's useful. Say, I mean, we have a lot of places like the wheel. Now the wheel is a wheel, it's round. Don't try to make it square just because you understand only squares. And also, I mean, you have these, of course, WhatsApp messages that you go, that there's a test and the fish is going to be tested how you climb a tree. Definitely the fish is going to fail. So don't gauge them on what your parameters are, expand your parameters. So I think that's why that discussion is, for me, very important. And then we can move on to the other side. So that's
I think if I can add some of the current understanding of what autism is, it's very different from what maybe people thought 20, 30 years ago. And a lot of the better understanding from autism comes from advocacy, from people with autism that actually speak out and challenge our common understanding that indeed, like you said, Vikram, comes from problem-oriented looking at people, and makes it a more neutral understanding of what does the autism spectrum mean. And it's very diverse. It comes from people who are obviously mentally impaired and are struggling with lower intelligence, towards someone like Elon Musk, people who would probably be considered groundbreaking geniuses, and a bit awkward. And I think it's also very important to understand that a lot of the TV shows focus on the white, male, highly intelligent, socially awkward a genius. So a lot of our understanding from autism comes either from a very limited understanding. So people saying, "Oh, you're not flexible, you're very rigid, you're awkward, you're not looking at people," or people think on the other end that the Hollywood style people, autists,
superpower, the genius.
They have a superpower, and they are they call it savant, I think, in Dutch, but probably in English also. Someone who's extremely talented in one particular aspect, like Rain Man or The Good Doctor, or these kind of examples. And I think a lot of the people that I know with autism, I hang around with a lot of people on the neurodiversity spectrum, both in my family as well as professionally in some parts of my work. They are photographers. Some of them are psychologists. Some of them are really struggling with life. Let's be honest, not everyone fits in, and some people get damaged from not fitting in from an early age and are not able to hold a regular job, but they're still looking for a way to have purpose in life. Some people are artists, some people are indeed in IT. So they're just humans.
Exactly.
However, a lot of the people that are now researching autism or working with people with autism see it as both a delayed as well as an increased speed of developing. So there's some areas in life that people develop faster, particularly when they're very interested in, and some areas in life that people or children and young adults develop less fast in. So there's a myriad of different development phases. So in the case of, I have a child who's diagnosed with autism, probably on his technical understanding of certain subjects, he's 14 or 15. And on his understanding of social relations and being appropriate and acting accordingly within friendships, he's probably 5 or 6. And his calendar age is almost 12. So you cannot just judge him according to the normal standard of an understanding of what a 12-year-old does. There's a there's both sides of him, and it's important to see it and also to approach him accordingly and help him understand things according to where he is on the different areas.
Yes. I think the important part, first of all, is that why do we need to label people? Why do we need to label them? And the connection is human to human connection, and to be sensitive to everyone. I mean, autism is one aspect, sensitive to every aspect of people, and take the good things. I don't know. I mean, why do you even have to focus on the other part? And when you talk about anything with the mind, suddenly of course, there is a lack of understanding. So things become labeling, while people have all kinds of deformities and problems and issues. I don't have to put on my head that, oh, I have a high blood pressure, or I am diabetic, or I have this. You don't have to label yourself. Your life goes on as what you are, and take the person for what the person is. So I think that aspect also needs to be discussed. I think we're losing that on a lot of areas.
But,
and no.
Yes and no. I was going to say,
you take it, Myrthe.
Okay. I agree with you that you need to look at the person and what an individual needs. However, as I mentioned before, I was late diagnosed. So for 39 years, I got my official diagnosis at 39. For 37 years before, at 37, I learned that I'm autistic, but at that time I didn't pursue a diagnosis for various reasons. But learning that I am autistic, I've always felt that I was different, that there was something that I was experiencing things differently. And being able to put that label on myself, that it's autism, it gave me a manual. It gave me an incredible, it gave me a lot of peace of mind in that I understood what was happening, but it also gave me a manual to deal with certain situations. I realized, okay, I'm very sensory, or sensitive to sensory input, especially sound. And knowing that, I can use that to arrange my life so that, for example, I have a noise cancelling headphones. I have for when I work at the office and it's extremely busy. I have earplugs when I'm in a busy train to just lower. So it's given me the label knowing that I'm autistic has given me a manual to deal with myself and to deal with the world around me more than anything. And that has given me a tremendous amount of inner peace and self-respect, an understanding of myself and self-respect. It's given me a foundation. I know who I am now. I know what I need in life. So in that sense, it does make sense to use the label for information and giving people and I've heard this from a lot of people who were late diagnosed. Like, I finally know not what's wrong with me, because nothing's wrong with you, but how to, I have a manual for myself and for the world around me. So in that sense, I think the label there's an advantage to labeling. Another thing is that, especially at least in the Netherlands, you need to have a label, a diagnosis of something before you can get professional help. So if you're dealing with depression or something, you need to get that diagnosed before you have access to help. So there's whether that's the right thing or not, that's a whole different story about mental health care, access to mental health care, but there's another need, a very different need for labeling. But in the end, I do agree with you and I don't agree with you, Vikram.
If I clarify, you might agree with me. I'm saying, say diabetes. Now, a diabetic being labeled in the sense of me having to say this person is a diabetic and I have to look at the person differently should not happen. But the diabetic should know they're diabetic, so that manual that you're talking about, not to have sugar or whatever other precautions they have to take, that's their manual and they should follow it. But me forcing a person to have something sweet is for me that sensitivity to anything. So I should not force you to do anything. Why sugar is one aspect for you. For an autistic, it might be something else. Like, oh,
Yes.
hug me. I have to hug you. No, I don't want to hug you. Because I don't like it or whatever. That's your aspect. So we should not push anyone for anything. So that's why I'm trying to say that these are aspects also that as a society being sensitive to people without labeling, respect their whatever their space, whatever way it has to be, respect that space.
Vikram,
Yes,
in an
Tabitha.
ideal world, I would absolutely agree with you. However, people do tend to label different behavior anyway. So if you are a person who just doesn't want to hug, and you can say, okay, I'll just respect that you don't hug, but part of me will still feel rejected because I'm a person who likes to hug. Well, actually, I'm not, but in the example that you used. So people will still be treated differently, but there will not be a logical explanation. And I've also very much struggled with getting diagnosis in my family. I felt it was forced upon us because of indeed the insurance issues, and I felt very uncomfortable with it because I felt labeling meant excluding people or putting them in a certain path, and then they can't deviate from that path anymore. But what I've found is that a label in a way gives clarity, as long as you see the label as something neutral, as indeed an invitation to talk, as an invitation to figure out what does this person mean. As long as we attach a lot of stereotypes, and especially a lot of negative stereotypes to a label, then indeed it becomes something that almost invites people to be discriminated against because of the way their brain operates. But it should be a neutral way of classifying, hey, this person may need something different and we need to talk. And we need to be understanding that this person is maybe different from me. And in an ideal world, I understand, Vikram, you're saying we should all be respectful of each other and all be understanding that there is such a thing as neurodiversity. And we're all having different preferences and different needs. But from what I know, a lot of the people around me that either have a diagnosis ADHD or autism, they've usually suffered through life from not understanding why they didn't exactly fit in, or why they were bullied, or why people didn't understand them properly, which led to depression or anxiety issues, and just a general sense of loneliness. I don't fit in and I don't quite know why. So finding out that there is actually a logical explanation for why you were not exactly like everyone else, you're the 1 or 2% that is just off the standard. From my understanding, for a lot of people has been liberating. And it should be an invitation to have a conversation, because not every person with autism or ADHD is the same, not at all.
Exactly.
But they are a bit different. They are in a way a minority of what is the common understanding of what's normal and what's not normal, and how we communicate and how we relate to each other and how we operate in society. So I think that's where I agree and I don't agree, just like Myrthe.
Well, I tell you why I want that discussion to happen is because what happens is that if you talk about autism and say being sensitive to people with autism, I still feel we leave out the larger aspect of being sensitive to everyone. I'm just saying, giving you an example. Say one child has a weak heart, and you go to a playground and everyone's playing a certain thing and the child cannot play. Now the fact is that you have to be sensitive and to understand. And maybe the person say the child has not been diagnosed. The heart has still not in that aspect, but the child doesn't want to do certain things. Physical activity tires the kid out, but other kids push the kid. So I'm saying without even finding out about the issues, respecting that and being sensitive to it on much larger things. I mean, I'm saying one as to physical aspect, nationalities, culture, race, a lot of aspects. I think we have to, I mean, not leave them out and focus on, oh, someone has a problem and we have to look at that person in a certain way or label them. Because this, when you say ideal world, look, Tabitha, this is my little bubble. I live in my bubble. And if in my bubble I can create what I would want an ideal world, I'm happy. I mean, look, there will always be a larger world beyond the larger world. On 8 billion people, there will always be people who either will not understand or the education will not reach them. I mean, everyone can't be educated on everything. It won't reach them. So for me, that little bubble starts, and then we increase the size of that bubble as we go along. So if this is, let's just say this is the ideal world. Let's take it from there.
Yes, I do agree. There's something you're not stating it explicitly, but I can hear it in what you're saying, Vikram. That and I do think that no matter what, whether it's about, in this case, autism or any, we need to ask other people more often, what do you need?
Exactly.
What do you need to function, or what do you need to feel comfortable?
Exactly.
A diagnosis is not the end of a conversation, it's the beginning of a conversation.
Yeah, you know what Myrthe is agreeing, she's agreeing with me, the aspect for in general, she's saying that in general, you must ask people what they need. And that's why the mediation aspect will come in. And that's when we, of course, Tabitha will let her take the lead on the mediation part, Tabitha. Mediation and neurodiversity.
What I've experienced is that the taboo or even the discomfort to talk about a diagnosis or neurodiversity is mostly on the side of the neurotypicals that are a bit hesitant because they're afraid that they will be seen as someone who doesn't care, or that they're afraid to say something wrong. And from my experience with particularly a lot of people with autism, but also people who are okay with ADHD or who have come to terms with the fact that they have brain damage through a birth defect or through an accident later on in life. So the people that at some point have worked through their I don't want to say disability, because I don't think it has to be a disability, but they've worked through the fact that their brain works different than others. They are absolutely comfortable to talk about it. It's the people who don't have a certain diagnosis that get awkward, and then everything becomes awkward. If, in my experience, if someone tells me in a mediation session or in a coaching session or in another professional capacity, hey, I have autism, then I've learned to understand that that's an invitation to ask, okay, what does your autism mean for you? What does ADHD mean for you? What is it that you need from this event or from this speaking engagement to feel comfortable? How would you like me to approach you? And as a very concrete example, the other day, I wanted to ask someone to be a speaker at my event. This is a person who is openly autistic, or actually autistic is the hashtag that people use on social media to explain I have a diagnosis and I'm okay with it. So I know this person. I don't know that person very, very well, but I know that this person identifies as autistic. So I just send a text saying, I would like to ask you something. What is a convenient way of posing the question? Do you want me to send an email? Do you want me to call at a specified time? Or do you prefer me to write on WhatsApp?
Yes.
And that to that person was very comfortable, because indeed some people find email coming in very stressful. Other people find calling very stressful. Yes. A third person may find calling very comfortable, because they can immediately ask all the questions that they have when they receive the information. So everyone has a different preferences. And by just opening up the venue, like just tell me how you want me to communicate my question to you, that gives space for someone to tell. And this person actually told me, can you first write on WhatsApp? And if I have questions, I will tell you when we can call. Is that okay with you? And that person actually thanked me for asking the question, how do you want me to communicate with you? What is comfortable for you? Yeah. Because that opens the space to have a conversation about communication. And I think that's something that I've had to learn, because I was also a bit awkward. I got a kid who was diagnosed. Before that, I've had several people in a mediation session or in a private caucus telling me, hey, I'm in the process of getting a diagnosis, or I know I have a diagnosis, but my employer doesn't know, and I don't want this person to know. And then I thought, well, I became silent and I didn't know what to do. So I've learned throughout the last 10 years to understand that someone sharing this information with me is an offer for me to ask, what does it mean? And I think something that is a painful truth, unfortunately, because of how our society is organized, is that at least in the Netherlands, 70% of the people with autism that would like to work actually is not employed because of the taboos and because of the lack of understanding. Also the suicide rate among people with autism, and usually in combination with social exclusion, loneliness, not being able to fulfill the needs that everyone has to be happy, to feel comfortable, to do things that you enjoy, that have an impact, is several times higher than under the average population. So these are matters that we need to take serious, and we need to be mindful of, also as mediators, because the impact of a conflict at work, when you've struggled to perhaps find that job, or if you're aware of your chances of finding a job again, might be much higher than with an average person, even if they're in IT and everyone is desperate for people in IT, and there's a million vacancies around the world. The impact of losing a job might be different because you come from a different perspective. And I think that's something as mediators we need to be mindful of the impact of stress and the impact of social exclusion, taboos, stereotyping, to make sure that the mediation doesn't become even more unsafe or becomes a really traumatizing life event. Any conflict is a bit of a traumatizing life event for everyone. But if the consequence is that you lose the job, or you may lose the valuable relations that are the only relations that you have, or that you really base your self-worth on, that's something to be really sensitive about. And I think Myrthe can also tell a bit about what the impact is of stress, because I don't think people with autism necessarily need a gigantically different approach in mediation. It's much more sensitive, and I have a couple of tips that I can offer for mediators that are interested. But the main issue, I think, is how to navigate stress.
Yeah, that's.
You want to add on that, Myrthe?
Yeah, before she comes in, only thing, Tabitha, what we will also want from you is, and from both of you, is that one is generally in mediation, there are certain aspects, asking whatever questions and everything, and are there anything specific in relation to neurodiversity or autism that you found are areas which, or questions or way of going about it, which is different? I mean, or
yes,
is it the same? Yeah. So that both the things aspect also you will take up.
I have a whole list of things that I'll share after, but I think we need to start with the impact of stress, because stress is a very important topic for both people with ADHD or another neurological disorder, as well as autism.
I will. It's a nice. Talking a bit about stress is a nice segue into tips and ideas of how to facilitate in a mediation process when people with autism or someone with autism or ADHD is involved. Stress is a general, we all know stress, whether you're autistic or not. It doesn't matter. Everyone knows stress. The only thing, or the one thing that seems to be different, at least with autistic people, not just with autistic people, I think the same goes for depression, or people with depression, or people with ADHD and certain other neurodiverse brains. They're much more sensitive to stress, and they react stronger to stress. So what happens is when stress is a conscious or a subconscious reaction of the body to and the brain to a situation that how to say it, that the situation is unsafe. And I'm not talking about lions attacking you. It can be anything. It can be the light fall in a room, the way the light comes in a room. It can be the drilling of road construction going on outside your window. It can be the buzzing of the fridge in another room. All of those things, or it can be the sun like shining on the window opposite the street or something like. It can be very or the dangling earrings, big hoop earrings of the person you're talking with. That can cause a stress reaction in someone with autism who's very sensitive to details, like I said. So the body reacts as if that will be like a dangerous, unsafe situation. So I need to say stressors are subjective. So what creates stress for me may not create stress for Tabitha or for Vikram and the other way around. What creates stress for you, Vikram, may not create, maybe like, oh, what are you talking about? Stress? No, totally relaxed. So each person reacts to stress differently. People with autism, ADHD, they tend to react stronger. However, there are 3 universal stress factors, and that cause stress for everyone, whether you're autistic or not. And they are uncertainty, lack of information, and loss of control. Those are for everyone. It doesn't matter. Only, again, stress factors are individual, so everyone reacts to those individually. Stress leads to that signal that the brain gets that a certain situation is unsafe. It leads basically to 3 reactions, to any of 3 reactions: flight, fight, or freeze. So either you start fighting, you flee, you run away from a situation, or you freeze, you just stop, cannot react. As you can see, going back to a mediation, all of these reactions have in common, the part of your brain that is able to think rationally and to analyze and to take control, that part loses control, that it drops off. And your emotional part, the part that regulates your emotions and your very basic functions, those parts of the brain take over. So in a mediation, going back to a mediation setting, these reactions can lead to emotional reactions. Fight, someone might lash out, have a meltdown, what's called a meltdown in relation to autism. They can fight, start lashing out at people, start crying, start getting very angry, even though there might be not an immediate proportionate cause for that. Or the other way around, they might shut down, stop, block, stop talking, unable to talk or to process what's going on, not give you and this is obviously the freeze reaction, not give you not be able to talk. None of these reactions are obviously very helpful. And I think that is where you need to, that's how to say it, in order to.
This is where a mediator has to be sensitive to what's going on.
Yes, I think so.
Is it okay if I take over?
Yeah.
Are you in the middle of something?
No, just one more thing. I think going back to what causes those 3 stress factors that I mentioned before, the uncertainty, lack of information, and loss of control, basically anything that follows. I don't know everything that Tabitha is going to say in terms of tips and how to, but I'm fairly certain that everything that will follow and all our tips, they are coming back to these 3 stress causes. Get rid of uncertainty, give information, sort of those things. That's where all of the tips or everything that's going after will boil down to, I think.
It should anyway.
It should anyway, yes. Taking away the stressors, and I think that's the very important part of what a mediator can do.
Yeah. So there are, I think, 2 things that quickly happen. It's either someone is overstimulated or understimulated in a stressful situation. So the things that Myrthe described, being very sensitive to light, very sensitive to sound, being sensitive to some drilling that is going down on construction 3 offices down from the road. These are signs of someone being overstimulated. Someone might also be understimulated. So I've had people with autism that would bring something to keep their hands occupied. Because that's something they've learned, helps them to concentrate when at least their hands are being stimulated differently. That's something that is a trick for people who are understimulated. And by creating a space where that's okay, so that's indeed the conversation that you have as a mediator. And it's very helpful if someone in an individual intake, I choose always to have an individual meeting with clients when it's a labor or a hierarchical dispute. If someone is disclosing that they have a certain sensitivity to A, B, or C, then you can have a conversation on how that sensitivity can be countered in the mediation. So I'm completely fine if someone brings something to keep their hands occupied. I've had someone counting cards without actually looking at them, but that would keep them calm. That was their way of suppressing the stimulus. I think as a mediator, it's important for me to have the conversation. And quite honestly, since I've been learning about neurodiversity, I have the conversation with everyone, whether there's an indication of a diagnosis or not, because conflicts are stressful in general. So I ask, how would I know that you're getting stressed in a conversation? What are the signs, and what are then helpful things that we can agree on? Do you feel completely comfortable to ask for a timeout? Or do you want me to check in with you and equally with the other person after half an hour or after 1 hour if an extra break is needed? What are the signals that we can agree on? Or do you, if you're very impaired because of stress and because of the situation you're in, do you want to bring someone that is a person of confidence for you that can see the signs that you're going towards a meltdown, or that you're losing it, or that you're no longer processing the information, and that can just on your behalf, because you trust that person and it's done in a respectful manner, ask for breakouts so that you can go for a walk, or you can take a deep breath, or you can drink a glass of water, or maybe just have 15 minutes on the toilet, whatever works for you, so that the stress level can go down and you can start to engage again. Because indeed, if someone is hyper stressed, then the brain freezes, and any cognitive presence needed for having a conversation is just gone. So there's no point as a mediator just push on and just say
someone will not. No information will get into the brain, will be processed.
Is this pointless? So what I often do is if I know that someone is actually autistic or has ADHD or is overly sensitive to certain stimulus, is indeed I will not wear any jewelry that will make noise. I'm usually a person that likes to talk with their hands. I will reduce the amount of hand movements, because every extra information I give, whether it's my face telling different stories, my hands, the room being very busy, all those things, those details need to be processed and organized. And the processing and organizing is exactly something that a lot of people with challenges on the neurodiversity spectrum are struggling with. It just takes them more time. We may just go into a room and think, okay, it feels fine, we're in a room, we're safe. And we mean being neurotypicals. And someone with autism or ADHD may have an inclination to constantly scan the room and constantly keep being busy and assess again and again, is this space safe? So it just takes a lot more brain space. It's like a computer that is operating 10 programs at the same time. Obviously, that's going to slow down the speed of the computer's production of whatever they have to do. It slows down. So we as mediators need to be sensitive of it.
Am I going to come in between, or am I going to come at the end? When are you going to? After all your points, or am I going to come after every point?
If you have questions, just ask.
No, I tell you why. Oh, thank you very much. You're so nice. So, where I'm trying to come from is, when I talk about a general sensitivities, because a lot of people are not diagnosed. So for a mediator's perspective, we have to be sensitive to a lot of aspects about people. And how do we do it in various other ways? Because definitely when someone or parties walk in, they might not know what they are in terms of, like I said, not being diagnosed, but we have to be sensitive to everyone. So how do we do that? So I'm trying to create that kind of a general aspect that, okay, like you said, say hand gestures. Now, should as mediators in general, us not use them? Because we don't know who can react in what way to a hand gestures, moving our hands too much. I'm just trying to say that, is there a certain kind of a code of conduct that we are going to put out so that we are in a way sensitive to everyone's requirement? Can we come to that kind of a manual, or is it
No.
going to be based on the situation? I'm just, look, this is a point of discussion, Tabitha. It's not, I am
Yeah,
not
no,
saying
no,
that
yeah.
I'm not, I know the answers. I'm saying that in general, are there some basics about people that in a way, if you interact in a certain way, it takes care of people through diverse, first of all, like I always I'm saying, in diverse nationalities, diverse cultures, diverse neurodiversity, diverse of various aspects of things. Is there some common that we can bring down our communication with people too, or an interaction with people too, so that we are in a way giving them that safe space? So
Yeah, good question. So what I think is needed is, as a mediator, the first half an hour after meeting someone, you don't assume anything. You're just super curious, and you're really trying to establish a relationship so that someone feels safe, and that someone feels that you're curious and you're honestly interested to understand where they're coming from and what they need from you as a mediator. So after you've done that for that first half an hour, sometimes maybe even 40 minutes, 45 minutes, if someone is very stressed, you will have some hypothesis on how that person probably prefers communication or not. And then you will test that hypothesis. I can't say the word, but you will test your assumptions. Am I correct in understanding it's important for you that you have that you understand what will be the topics of the first meeting? Am I correct in understanding that for you it's important that, well, whatever it is that you get from the person? So it's very important as a mediator. I think we need to have a very rich toolbox, and after meeting a person, we get a certain feeling of what is the type of mediator and what is the type of tools that this mediation is going to require.
Because Tabitha, where I'm also coming from in a way is because I had that symposium last month on heart, soul, spirituality, and mediation. Myrthe, I don't know whether, of course, you might not have followed that, because people don't follow what I do, because I do a little too much, maybe.
This is a bit much, yeah.
Yes, but that symposium, the idea behind that symposium was that a mediator and a mediation brings in lots more than we understand. So that connection with the heart, soul, and spirituality, those are elements which get lost out, because those are elements which make us understand people on a different level, our connection with people on a different level. And that, call it sensitivity or whatever words you want to use, but the matter is that you are able to bring in a certain kind of energy. We are going to have in the conference a discussion on energy fields and mediation. So are there certain other ways of us in some way giving people a safe space, or they themselves feel that they're in a safe space, and that communication to flow in a certain manner, more than what theory can give us? So
yeah. So a couple of things I do is I make sure, like I said, not to have disturbing jewelry, but also I will choose neutral clothing, so that the clothing is not an extra stressor, or at least an extra distraction, because distraction may lead to stress. I will usually use a lot of visual tools. So if parties agree on an agenda, I will make sure that I'll put the agenda on a piece of paper. So whenever someone is lost on where we are, they can at least, they don't have to ask where we are. They can have a look at the paper and think, okay, yeah, we were going to discuss trust, and we were going to discuss the incident, and we were going to discuss, so we're probably somewhere here on the agenda. It's about creating a certain predictability, perhaps, in the process. I will also make sure that that people understand that within the mediation, probably the first thing we're going to do is start with signing the agreement. The second thing we will do is set the agenda. I will ask both of or all 5 parties to add to the agenda. Then we will prioritize. This is a common process where everyone can speak up and say, this is most important to me. And after that, we will start the conversation. I will tell them, probably we'll have a break after the first hour, but if you need a break earlier, or if you already know that after half an hour your concentration is lacking, just let me know and I will accommodate. So just to create a certain understanding of the process usually gives people a lot of calm, because then they have some idea on how to prepare. We also have a video on our website that explains the mediation process in detail. It's a little cartoon, And that can be something that people can watch in their own time. Because I will tell someone in an intake, this is what you can expect from us. You can also read it on our website. And then additionally, there's also a video that just explains the mediation process in 2 minutes. So these are all things that help people to get a better understanding of what to expect. And that reduces the stress or the uncertainty, as Myrthe said. It reduces some of the uncertainty going into a conversation with someone that, for whatever reason, whether you understand it or not, you're in conflict with. Because a conflict is stressful for all of us. And I think it's important to realize that if you design a process that is friendly for people on the neurodiversity spectrum, the other people are not going to suffer.
Yeah.
Exactly. Because in general, the process is going to be cleaner, clearer, more predictable, and respectful for everyone at the table. So it's not, oh, I accommodate the person with autism and now the person without autism is going to suffer because they will have to wait forever or they cannot speak when they want to speak. That's not the case. You just create the space that works for everyone.
Tabitha, that's exactly what I started with, exactly what I said, that can we have something which is so general, which works for everyone? So that's what we have to work on, because like you said, maybe a pictorial description of the process. Does everyone understand from that? Then we have another guest.
Yes, we have another guest. I'm sorry.
What is the guest? No, but it's good. What is the guest's name? What is the guest's name?
The guest's name is Archie, and 2 years of Zoom calling taught me very early on that it's easier to let him be and walk across the screen once or twice, and then he's going to sit next to me and he'll be quiet again. It's easier to do it that way than to really push him out of the room. And
but so, tell me something, 2 years of Zoom calls, what has it taught Archie? But we have to understand that also. What has Archie learned from this?
I think Archie loves Myrthe being home very much.
Yes.
Has Archie understood and learned that whatever I do, Myrthe is going to still continue talking, so let's not distract us so much.
Yes, he has learned that. He also knows that when I'm talking here in front of my computer, I'm not going to move anytime soon. So I'm learning. I'm there for cuddling.
But has Archie become camera friendly or not?
Yes, very much.
Okay, so maybe we can have a conversation with Archie sometime later.
Actually, sometimes I've had people bring in a dog. Some people have a dog that is there's like that is a
support dog
or a support dog.
Like you mean an official support dog, or just?
It can be an official support dog or just a companion. That is somewhat trained, and that can be very helpful in alleviating stress. Because if you pet a cat or you pet your dog, and I'm okay with having a dog in the room as long as it's a well-behaved dog and the other person is not terrified of the dog, because then it will have an opposite effect.
But Tabitha, that's why
But the oxytocin really helps to lower down the stress level. So if someone says my thing with stress is have my dog around, then I don't mind having a dog around. I think as a mediator, I need to be adaptable to people's needs, whether they are on the neurodiversity spectrum or not.
Exactly. So finally,
I think two things are very important.
No, but Tabitha, before you go forward, let me say that let's focus on online mediation, because I think that takes care of a lot of things for people in general. I mean, in general, like you said, a pet around, or just the fact that you don't have to read the room or look at a lot of things. I think we should start focusing on that being that's the way we should take mediation forward, because I do only that. I only do online mediation. So I know it works, and it works in high value commercial matters. So why should it not work in every kind of thing? So maybe we can also.
Yeah, thank you. Because indeed, some people with autism have indicated that they would really prefer to do the mediation online, because that avoids them going through public transport, and avoids them having to find out where to meet, if they are going to be able to park their car, what the room looks like. I've had some people that actually did a trial run. So they wanted to meet face-to-face, or their employer insisted on meeting face-to-face. So they would have a trial run in order to get to know the space, to know where to park, and to reduce those uncertainties that are stressors when you're going into a meeting.
Exactly.
But I've also had people saying, I prefer to do the mediation from my own home because my husband or my wife or my coach can be present. That's something that we always discuss. Is there someone that is helping you in communication in general, and is it okay if that person joins? So I've had online mediations on the particular request of people with autism, because indeed that would alleviate a lot of stressors of being in a different and sometimes sometimes perceived as a not safe space face to face.
Right. Again, I go back to the same thing, that a lot of people might themselves not be able to understand this aspect, but just the fact, like you just said, having a pet around by itself will have a certain effect on them, which they might not even know that. So that's why I'm saying that online mediation aspect of it nearly needs to be pushed in general.
It's definitely something to consider. On the other hand, what I've experienced is that sometimes people who are under a lot of stress and may or may not have something on the spectrum struggle with self-care. And if they are behind the computer, I cannot offer them a glass of water. I cannot read their body language and in that respect support them, sensing that maybe they need a break. So it's maybe sometimes easier to mask, because people have learned to mask, and I think Myrthe said something about it also, to mimic normal while all sorts of things are going on inside that actually hamper someone from processing the information. So there are pluses and minuses. And I think there's two things that mediators really need to be mindful of, or three actually. Let me stick at three. So one is we tend to give back information with different words. So I hear you say something, and because I think it's a bit acrimonious, or because I think it was a bit long, I'm going to summarize, but then I'm going to add a layer that is more easy for the other person to listen to. And that's something that as a mediator in a situation where you know there's neurodiversity, you shouldn't do. Because if you change the words, then the person with autism has to process the information again. And while you're talking, they are thinking, is that exactly what I meant? Because I use different words and I may feel differently. So it's much better to just repeat the words and connect to the language, the actual language and the words and the meaning of the words that the person with autism used, and to just turn it into the mediator's language. And that's something that I've been taught by a lot of mediators that also offer training that are really specialized in autism, as something very important, because we're so trained as mediators to just make things nicer or kinder to the ear, or just rephrase it. And that's something you shouldn't do if you know there's neurodiversity in the room. The second thing is we tend to talk a lot. We tend to explain our questions and sometimes ask 3 questions in 1 sentences. And that's just, it's not good for anyone. But it's particularly not good for someone that is struggling to process information and that is really thinking very hard on what's the appropriate answer. So just keep your questions smart and simple, and 1 at a time. And I think that's something that a lot of mediators, me included, struggle with, because we tend to talk and then we just ask, and while we're making up and creating the story, we're blah, blah, blah. And that's just, it doesn't work. I think it doesn't work with anyone in stress, but it definitely doesn't work if the person, 1 or more of the people at the table are autistic or have ADHD, because they just get confused, because you are asking things that are confusing, because you're asking 3 things at the same time. So which one should I answer first? Yep. And which one is most important? And oh my God, I lost the second and the third question. So it just creates chaos.
Yeah. And people with autism tend to be very want to be very complete in their answers and detailed, and so they may need to think about the answer, and they may want to consider, like, they insist on being complete very often and not leaving out the details. So that's another thing when you fire questions at someone.
But I think what you need to do is, based on, of course, your interaction with me, you have to tell me what are the issues that you felt while interacting with me, so that I can also learn and change myself. So maybe at the end, right now, whichever stage you want to, but this is important, actually important. So I
think the third point I would like to make is, as a mediator, it's very important that you accept the answer, I don't know. And it usually implicates, I don't know right now what the right answer is. As a mediator, you may feel like I'm on a certain path of discovering what are the real interests, what are the real issues, what are the needs here. So you may tend to push and to ask again and again. But if someone who's on the spectrum honestly tells you, I don't know, then you need to accept that. And you also need to trust as a mediator that as soon as that person does know, they will come back with the answer. But it may not be through at that session. And that's a difficult one because you may also feel an obligation towards the other party in the room that does really want that answer. So you have to navigate an eloquent way of accepting that the not knowing right now is not a way to insult or to keep, to refuse to disclose, but it's an honest, I don't know right now, I need time to process. And a way that can be helpful is also to just write down the questions that could not be answered at that time and to talk people through, like there's a couple of questions that couldn't be answered through this session. Is it okay if I just send you the questions in an email so that both of you have time to process the questions and perhaps have answers for the next session that we schedule in a week from now or something. But it has to be done in a respectful way, but that can be helpful so that you adapt to the process of processing information. And indeed, like Myrthe said, people with autism often would like to give an answer that is 100% correct. So they will give the answer when they've had time to process the thoughts behind it, and they feel certain that this is the right answer and not a half answer or a maybe answer. And that takes time. It takes time to come to an answer that you feel 100% certain about, or at least certain enough. So these were the 3 points that I'd like to make for mediators.
In adding to that last part, it's not just about getting the answers right for someone with autism. Sometimes they will also, when you ask them, how do you feel? Or they will not know at that point. They need time to think, am I angry? Am I sad? Am I insulted? So they need time. It's not just finding the answer to a question. It's also sometimes very, very like, what do I actually feel? That you need to give a person on the spectrum time for.
And now, are you going to answer my question? In your interaction with me, what were the issues that you felt what are the things I should change so that you are comfortable? You have to tell me that, because so I can create a safe space for you and make you comfortable. So tell me, please.
That's such a good question, Vikram. We mediators should ask that question more often in an honest and vulnerable way. Give me feedback. Yep. Myrthe, are you comfortable to answer that right now?
Yeah, I did not feel. For me, it was. I did not feel uncomfortable, or you did not. I think let's put it differently. What helped for me was watching some of your watching some of your other videos before this conversation to get used to. Well, I've known Tabitha, of course, so I know her, but to get used to you and your conversation, so that taking away the uncertainty. Perfect. Worked for me very much. So it's not so much in this conversation in itself, but what I did beforehand that helped me.
You knew what to
feel more. Yeah, I knew more of what to expect. So that is what I did to create more of a safe space for me.
Okay, so now we're going to step back. So the way when you watch those videos, what were the things? You have to be honest. You have to be honest.
I don't know. I honestly don't know if I have an answer to that right now.
Okay, so this is important. Look, feedback is important for me, is because look, I am willing to change anything that in any way makes anyone uncomfortable. So I'm definitely it's a general thing. I mean, I think we all should be sensitive to that. I mean, a lot of people will not give you feedback because whatever. I mean, everyone has their reason. Some people feel you'll get offended or whatever. But I think for me, honest feedback always is good.
Feedback isn't always bad. And
exactly.
you learn from. If it's good feedback, considerate feedback, you learn from it.
Absolutely, because the thing is, at the end of the day, either you say, look, this is me and I cannot change. Now I have become this over these years, and I feel that's not the right way for anyone. But for me, definitely it's not. I mean, we're learning every time. What is the, why should we even think that we've become someone?
You can always learn. Yeah. If you're open, if you have the right mindset for it, you will always learn, and you can always keep learning.
And the other thing that from you, I don't know whether you've seen all my, of course you haven't seen all
no,
my
I haven't
videos.
seen
No
all
one,
of
no
them.
one can, no one can do that.
There were too many of them.
You're a mass producer, Vikram.
Actually, I'm telling you, in the last 1 year, I think I put out some 280 videos.
Oh wow!
In the last 1 year.
That's impressive.
So, I can understand why you were joking about your marriage being in danger. He said that. I'm not making it up. He said it in public.
At the risk of my marriage.
I trust you. I trust that you're not.
So that's why I can understand not watching everything, but there are cases where there have been situations that videos have gone on. I mean, those shows have gone on for 4 hours. One particular one went for 4 hours and 11 minutes without a break. So with me, time is not a factor. You can take as long as you want, and I'm never going to. Only thing is, look, in the symposium, and in the conference, the thing is there are scheduled. It's like every hour I've scheduled something because definitely I want to bring in as many thought. So in that sense, the earlier sessions I had to break them at that point. But this session, there is no such rush of anything. You can take your time, but please educate us, take us through whatever you feel we should know, so that we are first sensitive, and also at the same time, of course, Tabitha will generalize that in terms of mediation in general, and not only specific to people with a certain kind of a whatever. So anything else that you want to tell us? Anything else?
I think a lot of good things have already been said, and I think 2 points are important. And I think they don't just go for mediators, but probably for anyone. When in doubt, ask. If you're not sure how to interpret someone's behavior, ask. How do you feel? Going back to the eye contact thing that we mentioned, if someone's not making eye contact, it may be because they're listening very intently. They may not show that they pay attention, but they may not want to make eye contact because they need their energy and their focus on listening and hearing what you're actually saying. So don't, and that's the other thing, don't assume anything. But they're connected. Don't assume anything, and when in doubt, ask. And especially what Tabitha already mentioned, I think a lot of autistic people are very willing to tell them. They're to tell you what they need or what they feel, or don't know what they feel maybe. So yeah, it's don't assume, and when in doubt, ask. I think those
a good lesson in life for everyone. I think that's
exactly.
Yeah,
exactly.
But I think it's really the neurotypical. So the people who don't have anything on the spectrum or not yet discovered they are on the spectrum, they are the one that are afraid to offend someone. So they are being awkward. They are really the one that bring the awkwardness to the conversation, because they are thinking and they're behaving and they are expressing uncertainty because they want to ask, but they don't know how to ask. And they are the one that are really influencing the space in the room. When it is about this particular topic of, hey, your responses are different from what I'm used to, and I don't know what to do. And I've not yet met anyone with autism or ADHD that was open about it, that felt offended when there was a genuine question asked of, hey, tell me what, but the main thing is not to ask a yes or no on a stereotype, but the main thing is to ask, tell me about you. Tell me, you just shared with me that you have either depression, burnout, or issues with your concentration, or whatever it is you shared. Thank you for sharing. I really appreciate that you feel safe enough to disclose this information. I will treat it carefully. Tell me, how do you want to address this issue with the other party? Or tell me, how can I help you if this is something that you're vulnerable about? How can I include that knowledge in the mediation? What is it you need from me? So these questions are very much related to, I want to do right by you, help me do right by you. And I've not had anyone responding to me with the sense of that's not appropriate, or I'm offended that you ask, or why don't you know what to do? You're the mediator, you are supposedly an autism expert. How can you still ask me these questions? I've not had any of those responses. So I think we need to be comfortable to have the conversation. The taboo is on us, not vice versa.
So
Or the
from there,
taboo is in us.
from there, what of course, I've been talking about this, that whom do you have as mediators in the world in general? Like I keep saying, this mediator mindset. Now, what is that mindset? Because look, I am totally against this whole concept of we will make you a mediator, come to our 40-hour factory and we'll make you a mediator.
No.
I'm totally against that concept. There is much more that goes into people. So I think if you get the right people, and the people with the mediator mindset, of course, I talk about skill development and honing the skill. That's a whole process of life. I mean, that's evolution in life. But
it's a toolbox, not the attitude.
Yes, exactly. So that part of it will happen. But the main thing, I think, that we need to identify the right people and bring the right people in. That, look, everyone senses people. Whatever you can talk about, whatever, I mean, neurodiversity is just one aspect. A lot of other things that people are going through in this world. But sensing a human being and sensing the honesty that that person is coming from, and to be able to connect on a certain very basic level, I think that is what some people have. And that is where, again, that heart, soul, spirituality aspect that I keep talking about, that brings in something there. And anyone would, I think, feel safe in that space with that person. So that's also important, whom we are bringing out as mediators.
Yeah, I think it's very important to, as a mediator, come to another person as a human before you come to that person as a professional with this and this background and this education. Indeed, you need to be able to connect on a human level, because otherwise, how can there be safety? Safety to disclose the things that maybe you're afraid of, or that you're uncomfortable about, or that you're ashamed of, maybe even in a conflict. There's always a degree of shame. How did we end up at a mediator? How come we couldn't solve this ourselves? So I can completely agree with you on that. Yeah, and I think one other point I wanted to stress out is I'm asked sometimes to indeed talk about mediation and autism. And it is something, or mediation and ADHD. We have both diagnoses in my direct family and in my extended family. So in a way, well, I'm not, I would say I'm an ally with some personally lived through experiences. But I don't think I wanted to have this conversation with you, Vikram, with all respect, without Myrthe. Because I think it's very important as a professional, and Myrthe is a professional also, that I open up, and I went to Myrthe last week, and that we discussed together what are the important topics. Because I can't just come from, I've read books and I have a kid and I'm maybe someone's sister or I'm maybe someone's own aunt, and then therefore I'm an expert. It's a conversation that we should have as a community, and it should be an inclusive conversation, where the person with autism or with ADHD is as valuable as the supposed expert.
Well, I think the main thing is that Myrthe coming in was not because of the fact that she's autistic, it's because the person she is. And that was the wonderful part, to have that conversation with her as what you are as a person. Okay. Everything else about being autistic or your experience with it, that's just bonus. That's just been bonus. So talking to you has been wonderful.
It's one of the things I am. I mean, my identity is built just like your and Tabitha's identity. It's made up of many different parts. And my being autistic is just one of those parts.
Maybe it's good to disclose how we met, because we're
that's an interesting
neither of us like football. Neither of us, I think, has ever been to a football match.
No, it's the only
except one time in Yerevan, which is in Armenia. I was there for a project of the European Commission, and Myrthe was living there at the time with her partner. And somehow we knew, I think, an Armenian. I think we both knew an Armenian. And he said, but your country is playing a friendly match, like the official teams. A friendly match.
It was not a friendly match. It was a qualifying match.
Was it a qualifying match?
It was a qualifying match. I think for the European soccer championships or something. Okay. My partner was a soccer fanatic, and he was a big fan of the Dutch team.
So anyway, we two random blonde Dutch women in our 20s, or maybe you were in your early 30s.
I was in my 30s then, but yeah.
Met on a square in Yerevan with maybe 20 fanatic Dutch football hooligans dressed in orange that everyone was shocked of. We were trying to make it very clear we didn't belong with them.
Also, that hat that people wear.
Yeah, it was
yes. After the soccer match in front of the football stadium.
It was crazy. Yeah. But anyway, that's how we met, through mutual friends in Armenia watching a football match 20 years ago.
What a connection. What a connection.
Yeah.
So when people have to connect, they will connect.
Exactly. And that was long before we either of us got involved in autism in our own ways. So
wow. That's amazing. Isn't it amazing? But Myrthe, also, you look, again, I'll go back to the same question. You watch the shows now from the perspective of the shows itself, not about me, but the content. Is there anything that you enjoyed in those? Was there anything useful?
I'm learning a lot. I'm learning. Of course, I don't have a mediation background. So I'm learning a lot, and it's very interesting for me to listen to all those people from different parts of the world. And that's incredibly enriching for me. So I will definitely watch more of your videos, because there's still plenty to watch. I don't know if I'll ever manage all.
Exactly, but the problem is the problem. Either this is the amount of videos that you have to watch. You might be able to do it. Yeah. What about the content which keeps coming in? Can you imagine how many sessions you'll get from the conference itself? Yeah. All that has happened, plus more are going to come in. So either what I should do is I should take a break for some time, and I should only put out the posts of old videos, and I should say, okay, watch this kind of thing. Maybe on a daily basis, I should put something out. I think maybe I'll have to move to that. And I should
from Vikram's archives.
Exactly. And then that'll do two things. It'll give me a break to do other things. But I have my focus now on at the grassroots level. We have to identify people with the mediator mindset and take them forward, and they should take it up as a full-time activity, and how society should value them, so that of course they're very useful to society in general. So that's my focus. So maybe I should spend more time now doing that, because there's a lot of content now available. I think people can go through that for some time. So that's what I'm thinking. Let's see what happens. Because I'm saying that, but I still like to
love to chat.
You're enjoying it too much. You're enjoying it too much.
I keep telling people, what do? I just have conversations. That's all I do.
And you keep meeting talking to too many interesting people, probably as well.
Well, I have to find that's the challenge. Actually, that's the challenge. Finding first of all, they have to be wonderful people. That it starts with that. Everything else, I'll say, everything else is a bonus. So identifying the right people has been, of course, the important thing. And I will not do something. I mean, it's not that I have to put out so much content. It's just that I found so many wonderful people. That's what's happened. So I'm able to do this. So that's the advantage. People with the mediator mindset have that in them. They're good people. And when they bring in that, like the heart, soul, spirituality aspect of it, it makes it such a nice kind of an environment. And again, it's not about, like, say, conference, I should have lots of people coming into the Zoom session. Not at all. I am really happy. This is the conversation I want. I mean, everything can sometimes distract from the conversation.
So, you're a curator of curious conversations.
Exactly. I've used that word curation about people. I don't know whether people will like that, but I've used that.
Yeah, I think you're a curator of curious conversations, maybe. I think there's one more thing that I was just thinking, because you were asking about feedback. How can I make my shows maybe also more neurodiverse friendly? And this is not about your shows, but this is something that happened to another conference that I was part of. There was someone that just started talking, but there was a topic of that conference. It was about autism and parenting, I think, of teenagers and autism. And I'm sure this person was very knowledgeable and very enthusiastic and had lots to share, but that person failed to give a bit of an agenda of these are the things I'm going to talk about. And these are the moments that you can ask me questions. This is the approximate time that this meeting is going to end. And there were a lot of parents in the chat room that just started to have talks and started to complain because they had no clue, where is this going? and they were very uncomfortable because they needed a bit of an understanding of where is this evening going. When can I ask my questions about my teenager, or can I not ask any questions at all? So the fact that there was no predictability created uncertainty, and then people started to complain. So I think for some conversations, when you know there's a lot of knowledge, but there may also be questions from the audience, it's important to at the beginning give a bit of an understanding. This is approximately the flow, or there's no flow. There's no structure. We're just entering the conversation and just come in whenever you want. I think particularly people with autism or people who are a bit of a control freak like me, like to know what is expected of me and when can I enter the conversation or what not. Should we use the chat box or not? And these are things that can be helpful when you're preparing for a presentation.
I'll tell you, look, general, I'll tell you, because I have lots of shows. Every show has a certain purpose. So it started with evolution of a mediator, because I am totally against, like I said, this whole aspect that will make you a mediator in a 40-hour factory. So I had to showcase these of course, it started with Ken Cloke. He's known around the world, and I'm calling him
guru,
I'm calling him the grand old man of mediation. So I started with him to tell you, he says that he was a judge, and as part of that he went for some lecture about mediation, and he says in 2 minutes flat I knew my life had changed. But I told him that was just a point you had reached over these experiences of life, and you connected with this. And one purpose of that show is so that some person sitting in some corner of the world, if they get inspired and they might never have an option of attending a lecture about mediation, they connect with it. So that's, of course, that's one part of it. But just the fact that every aspect of your life, I start with, sometimes if they can tell me about their grandparents, parents, them growing up, the value system that they grew up in, what the family brought in, what were the circumstances they were brought up under, then of course the experiences with the friends around them, the people around them, then moving to, of course, as they grew, like with Ken, what he was involved in the civil rights movement, what experiences he got from there, and then because obviously everything has an impact on you. So he took us through that. Everyone in that series takes us through that. So that's the format there.
I saw the one with Daniel Weinstein, I think, and I saw a lot of old photos and him telling about his mother.
So the focus there is to go through the journey of the person's life. There cannot be any question set up, because as the person talks, we move from there, me asking them about certain aspects that they are talking about. So it moves like that. Then there's that series called In Conversation with a Beautiful Mind. That's just a conversation with nothing, no agenda, no direction, nothing. Again, it'll flow in an organic way, but we are not trying to get somewhere. Like I told you, in Evolution of a Mediator, we're going through that journey and we're trying to understand. In that series, we're not trying to conclude anything. We're just taking it flow. It could go anywhere, depending on, of course, whatever we enjoy talking at that time. Then there is one called Mediator Experiences. That was about mediators, about their memorable experiences in the mediation world. So, like I keep saying, not necessarily in a mediation, but in general. So what happened was I found out about this Weinstein Jams International Fellowship. And I found the people on that list. There were a lot of people that was already connected to. So I said, let's start this series. And for some time, just continue with these fellows. So that's what's happening with them, to tell us about their experience with the fellowship. But it has grown, that conversation grows beyond that. So of course they tell us about, we discuss other things. So, but that was the focus there. Then you have the symposium, where the topic is there. The person gives a presentation on that topic as much as they want to. Then we get into talking about what they spoke about, and we have that discussion. That's a symposium format. Conference, the idea was whoever wants to participate, of course, look, as a panelist, I said panelist, that you want to bring in something to the topic, you have something in mind. First, someone suggests a topic. So Tabitha suggested this topic. So she had to be here, because I've tried a lot of times, I cannot talk to myself. I've done that. It doesn't happen. A lot of people can do that. They can just look at the camera and have an hour long conversation with themselves. I've never been able to do that. So that person is required. Beyond that, whoever wants to join, I have sent out the invitation. Of course, the panelists, all of them can come in. Other people I put out in the post that if you want to participate in the conference, get in touch. Now what I've said is just like, comment on, and share my posts. I'll get in touch with you. Because do you have to have some active involvement in the work that I do? You can't just come in. So I've said that. So these are the various formats that I have. Everything has a purpose behind it. So it's each of them will be different. So when you watch those, Myrthe, you just look at it from that perspective, that I'm watching this show. So this will be the kind of what he's really looking at from this. So that's about. There's one more thing.
My tip from a neurodiversity perspective is, if you think of the audience before watching, then it can be helpful if you just introduce in a few sentences, this is a conversation in the context of a mediator mindset, and we're just going into an open discussion for the next hour or so. It just helps a person frame the experience they're about to watch. And that's often something that people who are challenged with finding the right context immediately need in order to get into the experience.
Absolutely. I think even in this conference also, I should first, before starting, introduce the concept of this conference. Why this conference? Why have I said it is about Mediation Vision 2026? Why 2026? I should start with that, because I have connected it to Ken Cloke's birthday. And he, of course, he's going to turn 85 in 2026, and from 2026 we'll move to 2031, so he'll turn 90. Why Ken Cloke? I put it down in my post also, that look, first of all, I had to there has to be a face to a mediator for the world, because people, of course, the word mediation itself, that it sounds like some technical concept. What are these people going to do? So for them to connect to that individual, who that professor, I had to put a face, and that face had to be credible and bring in everything that I want mediators to bring in: the humility that he brings in, the beautiful soul that he is, the wonderful person is. And no one has ever can say anything against that. So let's put that person out. So that's why connecting to Ken Cloke. Mediation Vision 2020. Why Mediation Vision? Because look, all over the world, just before this session with Sarah, we were talking about this, like everyone has the same issues in terms of mediation. Okay, in general also people have the same issue, but in terms of mediation, but in mediation, it's all been happening in pockets. They've been having that discussion within themselves. So, but I think we need one vision for ourselves as a world, as the mediation world, and then start working towards it. And I say Mediation Vision 2026, evolution of mediators and mediation, because mediators have, for some reason, have been left out of the discussion. It's always about, we want to promote mediation, we want to do this about mediation, but what about the mediator? That person isn't that person important? Because I keep saying this, I just recently found out that a mediator is required in a mediation. So let's not leave the mediator behind.
So how has this conversation with me and Myrthe helped you as a mediator develop your understanding?
Let me tell you very seriously. I mean, it is understand. For me, the conversation itself was what I enjoyed. The people that both of you, the wonderful people that you are, that is what I enjoyed, that aspect. If I took something from it, I leave that to my subconscious mind. And I say this about everything I do. I keep telling people that you have a quantum computer inside. Let it do its job. It will give you an output. It'll give you an output. It will tell you what to say right now. I'm not thinking what I'm going to say the next second also. I don't think before that, because I'm leaving it to some processing that has happened. And if I filter that, I'm getting an output from there. I should tell you. If I don't tell you that, I put a filter there. It's like me taking a calculator and checking the calculation of a quantum computer. It'll take me a century to do that, maybe more. So I'm saying that I leave to the subconscious mind, whatever it's picked up from the conversation. I've enjoyed this conversation. Both of you, such lovely people, and let's have more such conversations. Please participate in all the other sessions of the conference. Please drop in. You might not have time for the entire hour or whatever. Just drop in for as much as you want. Just some input, whatever that little input that you will give is important for that larger thought process that we have. Nothing should be left out in our discussions.
So well, thank you very much for offering your audience, your space, and your time to have this conversation and many other conversations. I really appreciate the work you do and the people you bring together, whether from Australia, Afghanistan, the US, the Netherlands today. I think it's amazing the effort you put into it, and it's indeed a pleasure to talk to you. So I completely agree with this being a very comfortable and joyful conversation. So thank you for that.
Thank you very much.
I do unfortunately have to mediate a community conflict free of charge.
You have to wait for 1 minute. Myrthe she has to conclude, and then you have to. You only then you can leave. Yes.
Myrthe, the floor is yours.
I can only agree with what Tabitha said. Thank you for having us and giving us the space to have this discussion, and for Tabitha, thank you for insisting on including someone who is neurodiverse, who is in this case actually autistic, in the conversation. That is something that doesn't always happen, but you're doing it as a matter of course, and I really, really appreciate that. I mean, in this case, it's me, but the fact that you do that you're considerate and you want to have this conversation with us neurodivergent people, instead of just talking about it. That is,
for me, it's common sense, and I think for Vikram it was common sense also. But thank you for pointing it out.
That's why Tabitha, you had to wait. That's why you had to wait to hear this.
Yes. So the same also, of course, goes to Vikram. That thank you for having both of us.
Thank you very much. And Myrthe, you have to participate in the conference and in general of the activities that I do. Yep. So thank you.